Madame, Monsieur, ladies and gentlemen, excellencies, I would like to thank you very much for being here today. We are very honored to discuss today the situation of freedom of association, assembly, and freedom of religion in Algeria. The side event is organized jointly by Jubilee campaign and the European Center for Law and Justice. We are very honored to have with us today two special rapporteurs on freedom of religion and on freedom of association and assembly, as well as persons who can testify on the situation of the Christians in Algeria, Mr. Pastor Ahmed Ouhaman and his daughter, and a former French ambassador, who was French ambassador during 7 years in Algeria, His Excellency Mr. Driencourt, who joins us. So we are very pleased. It is a very important topic. Algeria is an important country in Northern Africa. Algeria has also an important foreign policy. Algeria is a member of most of UN treaties on human rights. Algeria went through the UPR process and committed to do some progress on several issues we are discussing today. So our purpose is really to highlight some important issues in Algeria, especially for minorities, Christian minorities especially, and to see how the UN can help Algeria to improve the situation in regard to freedom of association, freedom of assembly, and freedom of religion. We have to say, frankly, that we are worried about the situation in Algeria for religious minority, non-Muslim minorities. Especially in the last 6 or 7 years, we have seen an important backlash in the protection of rights of freedom of assembly. Most of the Protestant churches in Algeria have been closed, 43 churches out of 47. It is important to understand that those churches are made of national Algerians. It is not a foreign church. It is a church composed of national Algerians who decided to become Christian. We also have seen a change in the constitution of Algeria in 2020, where the freedom of conscience has been withdrawn from the constitution. More recently, we have also seen an important NGO named Caritas. It's an NGO who is very active across the world, also very known here at the Human Rights Council. It is a Catholic NGO doing a lot of good work to support the poor across the world, and Caritas has been shut down in Algeria. So what we can say is that for Christians, even Protestants or Catholics, the situation is worsened in the country. They have to submit, I would say, to some restrictive laws on freedom of expression in the field of religion. They have to submit to some laws in the field of freedom of association that are arbitrarily imposed and applied on the recognition of churches. And now they are even restricted in their work on charities, which we can say at the end their activities are highly limited. This is why we consider that it is highly important that here the Human Rights Council is aware of the situation and can act. So we are now going to discuss more deeply this topic, this problem. I will first give the floor to Mrs. Gina Romero, who is the UN Special Rapporteur on freedom of assembly and association. You will present also your report and recent visit. Thank you.
Well, thank you. Thanks to everybody. Do I have to take? Yeah. So thanks to everybody for being here, and thanks to the Jubilee campaign and the European Center for Law and Justice for the invitation. It's a pleasure to be sharing with you today, but also with Nazila, who I know for some years now, in a very interesting work that the Office of the High Commissioner of Human Rights Office does, a related framework that is called Faith for Rights, that I don't know if you know, but if you don't, actually just try to have a look at it, because it's a very interesting framework on how faith and rights can go hand to hand and come together. I am really sorry that I have to leave after Nazila's presentation, but because I made a mistake by accepting a ticket and I need to run to the airport, so I really apologize. But then my team is staying also here just to take notes and brief me on what I miss when I leave. I want to present like very briefly some of the notes of the report on the official visit to Algeria that my predecessor Clément Voulet did from September 16 to 26, 2023. The purpose of the visit was to assess the implementation of the rights covered under this mandate, meaning freedom of assembly, peaceful assembly, and freedom of association, and also to identify challenges and promising practices and offer recommendations to assist compliance with international human rights laws and standards. And then many of the recommendations or the comments from the report says that there is a lot of work to do to fulfill the aspiration of the hundreds of thousands of people who march in the street for over a year, just claiming for changes. I presented the report on Friday. The report is already public, so for anybody who wants to see it, but also to honor and just to actually claim the government for actually just dealing and complying with the recommendations. Just regarding the main general conclusions regarding the freedom of assembly and of association and its and what has been happening in the country is it mentioned a lot concern about the continued repression and intimidation of individuals and associations critical to the government, and the continued use of unconstitutional law and practices from the pre-Iraq era to severely limit the exercise of the rights of freedom of assembly and association in the country. And then the report has like a very specific part regarding religious association and how this framework of hostility around freedom of association is actually affecting the freedom of religion and belief. So the report says that although the 2020 Constitution guarantees the freedom of worship and mandates the state to impartially protect places of worship, and then, well, regarding the multitude of religious associations in Algeria, we have seen, and the report claims that there are a lot of restrictions to the ability to religious minorities to exercise the right of freedom of association and peaceful assembly. And this is a big concern in the report. So the report mentioned, and something that you already mentioned also, is that some religious associations are facing obstacles in securing registration and then even renewing the registration and in their daily operation. So the registrations are currently governed by a law 1206 and the presidential ordinance 0603 that imposes excessive restrictions to the exercise of religions other than Islam. And several government representatives, while Clément was in the visit, expressed the view that tight control on religious associations is necessary to avoid terrorism and extremism, especially in a view of the past of the country. Some obstacles faced by members of the Islamic Religious Association. So the report presents two main cases. One, the obstacles faced by members of the Islamic Religious Association, Ahmadiyya Hamad, sorry for the poor pronunciation, and the other one, the obstacles faced by the Protestant Church of Algeria. So regarding the religious association, the first one, the request for registration has been refused without actually just disclosing which is the reasons of the refusal. Also, there have been criminal prosecution and imprisonment on charges of the members on charges such as convening or participating in an unauthorized meeting, performing religious rituals in a public place without a license, and denigrating Islam and harming the safety and unity of the country. Also, the authorities informed that as Muslims, the members of the association could attend regular mosques, but then allowing separate places of worship could cause chaos and risk of safety. This is what the government said to my predecessor. But then the report recognizes that those severe measures were born of the desire of stability and security, but are not a proportionate and legitimate restriction of the rights of freedom of assembly and association. Regarding the obstacles faced by the Protestant Church of Algeria, as it was mentioned, since 2018, 43 of its 47 churches have been closed, although the government claims that only 13 of 49 unauthorized premises and spaces have been closed following non-compliance with urban planning standards and safety conditions. And then also members of the church have faced criminal charges of having convened and practiced religious rituals in non-authorized place of worships. So this like a picture that the reports mention regarding the situation in Algeria is actually also related very closely with the contents of the other report that I presented, which is the thematic report regarding the gains and the challenges of the rising of authoritarianism in the world. And then we see that this report is actually mentioning that there is this like loop or process in between the rising of authoritarianism, the increasing of the use of hostile narratives to associations and assemblies in general, and in this case in particular to religious associations related to religious minorities, and also the adoption of laws or the creation of new laws that are actually reprising more the registration or the operation of associations in general, and also how these adoption of laws are creating new reprisals that creates also violence and that increases authoritarianism. So we see that that very worrisome landscape that is also happening in Algeria, related specifically with the exercise of the interlink between freedom of association and assembly and freedom of religion and belief, but also in general in what is happening with the access to participation in Algeria. So the report mentioned that it is crucial that Algeria enables all religious minorities to peacefully exercise their rights to freedom of association and of assembly, to comply with its international human rights obligation, and for the sake also of peace and stability. And the report also echoes the call of the Human Rights Committee for Algeria to abolish all legislative provisions that violate freedom of thought, conscience, and religion, and to ensure that all persons, including atheists and those who have renounced to the Muslim faith, are able to fully exercise the freedom of thought, conscience, and religion. And then I just want to take this last minute that I have still in my time to make a reflection of what is happening when these churches are closed. Because then a church is not only a building. A church is also a community. A church is also a provision of access of other rights. A church is also a provision of some items, some support, even a spiritual support, emotional support that communities need. So this is why it's very important to try to figure out a way to strengthen the system, also to claim for the government to stop doing the reprisals and stop doing the closing of the churches, because that means that a lot of communities, individuals and groups are being affected by the fact of these churches being closed. I leave it there.
Now we're going to listen to the testimony of Pastor Youssef Ourahman. Pastor Youssef Ourahman and his daughter Sarah, who is in the room. Pastor Youssef Ourahman is the vice president of the Evangelical Church in Algeria. He has spent most of his life doing, we can say, church work for the Protestant community in Algeria. He has a long experience on this activity, and currently he is facing penal prosecution for his activity. So we are first going to listen to you. We are very pleased to have you with us, Mr. Ourahman. À vous, s'il vous plaît, la parole.
Thank you very much. Anyhow, thank you so much for the invitation. I'm sorry I could not be there with you in person because we just came back from another actually advocacy campaign in Sweden yesterday. But I read my daughter Sarah's contribution and her speech, and actually she has done very well. So I will trust that she will be able to share and also explain better. But anyhow, I have been involved with the Algerian Church for many, many years now, over than 36 years now. I have been the vice president of the EPA, the Alliance of Evangelical Churches in Algeria, since 2018. So for the last actually 4 or 5 years, I have been very, very much involved in what has been happening for the Algerian Church and the Algerian community there. And unfortunately, we have had so many cases, which is very, very hard to understand. As I said, before, up till today, we have 54 condemnations from different courts, and actually 54 prison sentences that varies from 2 months till 5 years, and a lot of fines as well. And actually, there are two things that they use against us. Number one, they tell us you have been holding or organizing church activities without authorization, or they will tell us that you have been shaking or you are shaking the faith of the Muslim. On the other hand, we should not talk anything that will disturb the Muslim faith, which is actually an article, I think, 9, 10, and 11 in the ordinances of March 2006. So we have had many cases related to this law. And I talk about myself, actually, I have been condemned for 2 years, last July, on the 2nd of July. It was almost a year now, without even knowledge, without being informed, without even attending to the court, just condemned me for 2 years, and the accusation, of course, of organizing church activity without license. And actually, when the police came to investigate the building, when they heard, of course, that we have had something there, there was no proof whatsoever. But even there was no proof, I'm still condemned. I have been appealing against this sentence twice now, and actually the third time now is the final chance. Of course, is we're going now appealing towards the to the Supreme Court, and hopefully things will change. But it will take some time to get the verdict. But we have another case actually. Pastor Salem and 3 of his elders, they have been condemned for 3 years in prison, firm. And also they are also appealing to the Supreme Court as well. And the lawyers, when they were in the court, I think was back on the 30th of the 24th of April last month. This year, there was no proof from the mayor of the town, no proof from the governor of the town, and they told to the court and to the police, look, you have no proof that these people, they have been evangelizing Muslims or shaking the faith of the Muslims. But even though the Pastor Salam was held for 2 days at the police station for interrogations, and actually they were condemned for 3 years. And the fine goes up maybe around $1,200. But anyhow, they have also appealed twice, and all of us were appealing to the Supreme Court. We still have many cases now at the moment at the Supreme Court. So what I want to say is there are two things against us now that the government always use, to condemn us. Number one is because our church license or association license, the EPA license, is not renewed. So they tell us whatever we do is not valid, is not authorized. And number two, which is also a very big thing, is shaking the faith of the Muslim or in Algeria, which is also in these ordinances of March 2006. And the law of condemnations is related to those two situations, to the two legislations. So we have had very difficult time, and up till today, actually, there is only one church open, remained open. It's in Algiers, which is also a member of the EPA, and we don't know for how long it will remain open. But almost, well, not almost, but 46 churches has been closed down by the authorities. And those who are affiliated with the EPA, but there are at least about 6 or 7 are there. They are not affiliated, but also they have closed their buildings. So the situation is quite difficult, and it was for a long time. We have been sending all our documents, sending all our information that the Minister of Interior required since 2018 and even before that, but there was no response. Till actually recently, last year, the Minister of Interior started to respond to us, and our president, Mr. Pastor Salah, he had 3 meetings actually with the Minister of Interior, and finally we got a long list of reservations, concerning our constitution or the EPA constitution, and also the way that we have been doing and running, of course, and organizing our General Assembly. So tomorrow we will have the General Assembly in Algiers to be able to respond and answer all the reservations, the questions that they produced. And hopefully we will send it again once more to the Minister of Interior, and hopefully, of course, things will change. Because the main thing that what we would like to see it happening at the moment is renewing the license of the EPA, so we'll be able to open the churches and organize, of course, our church activities. But the problem is now, because a lot of Christians are really living a very difficult situation, in their spiritual life, in their walk with God. And so many, of course, they need help, they need pastoral care, they need counseling. Unfortunately, we cannot receive them in the building. We are not allowed to receive them. When we have had last summer, we have had some couples coming to stay with us, and then they were called to the police station, and then when they went back home, they were called again to the police stations in their hometown and home villages. So we were living in a very difficult situation, very strict. But anyhow, this is where we are, and so as I said, our main concern now, number one, is to be able to renew the license of the EPA, but of course, be able to reopen all the churches. And so many court cases, they have to be dropped because there is no proof in all what they have been accusing us. So this is what what I would like to contribute, but I trust, of course, Sarah, she will finish the rest with the better job. Thank you very much, and God bless you all.
Thank you very much, Mr. Uraman. Now we will give the floor to Sarah for a few minutes to continue the presentation.
Yep. Thank you, ECLJ, and thank you to Jubilee Campaign for organizing this side event. We're deeply appreciative of your efforts. So as my father just mentioned, my name is Sarah, and I'm the daughter of Pastor Youssef, whom we just heard from, and who unfortunately cannot be here today due to his ongoing Supreme Court case and difficulties leaving and entering the country. But I'm not only here to speak on behalf of my father, but also the broader community of over 100,000 indigenous Protestant Christians spread across over 50 churches in Algeria. Many members of my community say that becoming a Christian provides them greater freedom to live out their true identity, but also to pray in their own indigenous tongue. They say that having a community of Christians allows for them to meet, convene, eat together, and even have extracurricular activities for their children, as my father just mentioned. During the 1990s, the church was also a very significant space of refuge from the ongoing civil war that was happening on the exterior. And it's from this context that I grew up. As a second-generation Algerian Christian, I would also like to tell you what it's like to live as a Christian today in Algeria. I will highlight 3 things. Firstly, to be a Christian in Algeria means the protection formally provided by the law is an illusion. While Article 51 of the Algerian Constitution states that freedom of opinion is inviolable and that freedom of worship is guaranteed and shall be exercised in accordance with the law, this is not the case in reality. Freedom of expression, as well as freedom of assembly and peaceful demonstration, and the right to form associations are not extended to Algerian Christians. Specifically, under the 2006 ordinance by the National Commission for non-Muslim worship, we are supposed to get permits for churches, as my dad mentioned. But despite repeated attempts with the Ministry of Interior to register our places of worship, our applications are never received or confirmed as received by the office. And to date, not a single church has been granted a permit, despite one only being open. So even though it's not illegal to be a Christian in Algeria, anyone sharing about their faith cannot do so because they will be at risk of 5 years imprisonment, the maximum prison sentence, which is equivalent to possessing arms without a permit. Hence, despite the letter of the law, my community faces numerous bureaucratic and judicial measures to limit the freedoms which have or should have been formally granted to us. Secondly, to be a Christian in Algeria is also to be criminally prosecuted for crimes such as meeting in buildings or through blasphemy laws. Since January 2018, the Algerian government has been clamping down on Christian activities and restricting our religious, social, and even economic and civil liberties. To date, 46 churches have been forcibly closed by the authorities. 43 of the 47 churches within the Evangelical Protestant Association have also been closed. And to make matters worse, as mentioned by my father, fellow church members have been prosecuted on the grounds of having convened and practiced religious rituals in non-registered premises. When asked, the authorities say the decision to close these churches is simply because these buildings aren't fit for activities, but unfortunately the methods to remove Christians engaging in peaceful protests to these closures have resulted in beatings and violent treatment from police authorities in order to seal these buildings. You've already heard from the current ongoing court case with my dad, but his court case has now been escalated to the Supreme Court as the last measure, for which he has accusations of organizing church activities without a permit dating in July 2023. But after numerous appeals, twice to be specific, on the 3rd of April 2024, the Regional Court of Tizozo in Northern Kabylie reduced his charges from 2 years to 1 year in prison and maintained a $750 USD fine. We are now simply up to the whim of the Supreme Court of Algeria for when they will decide to call my father in. What's more is that my community has also been prosecuted under blasphemy laws. For instance, Hamid Soudad served 31 months in prison for simply reposting a cartoon of the Prophet Muhammad on his Facebook account. Actually, the working group on arbitrary detention at the UN later found that this court ruling was in fact arbitrary, but he was only just released several months ago. This brings me on to my third and final point, which is to be a Christian in Algeria is also to live in fear of persecution and prosecution. The Algerian government is doing all that it can, I would say, to instill a climate of fear amidst all Christians. But not just targeting them, there are also minority groups such as the Ahmadiyya Muslims, which was mentioned by Gina Romero, for example, that are also facing similar persecution. It's no wonder then that Algeria was placed on the special watch list by the US in 2021 and again in 2023. And largely due to their engagement in and tolerance of severe religious freedom violations. In 2019, Open Doors organization even labeled this persecution as a systematic campaign against Christians in Algeria. Now, what can you do, the international community, to address this situation? The UN member states and the international NGO community should put pressure on the Algerian authorities to stop this systematic campaign against Christian churches and individuals. We should urge the Algerian government to, 1, drop all prosecution of Christians for exercising their religious rights, 2, renew the license for the Evangelical Protestant Association, 3, reopen all the churches, and 4, abolish discriminatory laws such as the Ordinance of March 2006, for which the church closures have been occurring. When freedom of religion or belief and freedom of peaceful assembly and association go, so do our fundamental rights, and our rights are under attack. It's being denied, and arguably the whole Algerian society suffers. And with that, I'd like to end. Thank you very much for your time. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sarah Urban, for your presentation. We now have the honor to listen to Mrs. Nazila Ghanea, who is the well-known UN Special Rapporteur on freedom of thought and religion. She recorded a message for us, specifically on the situation in Algeria, so we can now listen to her.
I give many thanks to Jubilee Campaign for inviting me to send in some short remarks from the vantage point of the mandate of the UN Special Rapporteur on freedom of religion or belief. I very much regret that I'm not in Geneva this month, and I wish you well with this panel, which is of great importance. Let me just summarize the 4 communications that this mandate has sent regarding Algeria, in the hope that these might be helpful to your deliberations. Since 2018, the mandate has sent 4 communications on Algeria, all of which were sent between 2020 and 2021. 3 concerned allegations of offense to the precepts of Islam, and 1 concerned the closure of Protestant churches. In all of the former 3, prison sentences were meted out, including to minority Muslims, and in all 3, sentences were either overturned or reduced on appeal. The authorities have tended to respond to these allegation letters and have tended to defend both Algeria's protections of freedom of religion or belief, which it has to be said are more restrictive than permissible under the ICCPR, and to deny that any human rights violations took place. As to the first of these communications, in November 2021, the mandate was joined by the Special Rapporteurs on Minority Issues and Freedom of Opinion and Expression, as well as the Working Group on Arbitrary Detention, in raising the case of Mr. Hamid Soudad, a member of Algeria's Christian minority, who was sentenced to a fine and 5 years in prison for offense to Islam. The allegations followed Mr. Soudad's sharing on Facebook of a caricature criticizing the marriage of the Prophet Muhammad and Aisha. The Working Group on Arbitrary Detention subsequently declared his detention as arbitrary. In its response, the government defended Mr. Soudad's detention. I welcomed Mr. Soudad's release in July 2023. In the second of these communications, in August 2021, the mandate was joined by the Special Rapporteur on Freedom of Opinion and Expression in raising the case of Mr. Saeed Jabal Khair, a journalist, scholar of Islam, and secondary school Arabic and philosophy teacher, who was similarly sentenced to 3 years imprisonment and a fine for offense to Islam and denigration of the dogma or precepts of Islam. Mr. Jabal Khair's case, in Mr. Jabal Khair's case, once again, Facebook posts constituted the supposed crime. In this case, Mr. Jabal Khair had only made historical arguments about the roots of certain practices of pilgrimage and animal sacrifice, and expressed views concerning the role of the Holy Quran as a book of spiritual and religious guidance. He was the subject of death threats as a result of sharing arguments which fell within the scope of his academic expertise. In its response, the government again defended the detention. Mr. Jabal Khair was released on appeal in February 2023. In the third of these cases, in January 2020, the mandate was joined by several other mandate holders in raising the case of Mr. Yassin Mabaraki, an Amazigh Muslim and advocate of secularism, who was sentenced on appeal to a year in prison and a fine for offending the precepts of Islam, inciting discrimination and hatred, and possession of war material. His sentencing allegedly related to items found during a search of his home, and these included Amazigh flags, decorative firearms, a damaged old copy of the Holy Quran, and for his opinions in favor of secularism, which he shared in private meetings. Mr. Mabaraki had originally been sentenced to 10 years in prison, but his sentence was reduced on appeal. The Algerian government defended his sentencing in its response to the mandate holders. And in the final one of the communications I'll share and outline today, in December 2020, the mandate was joined by the Special Rapporteurs on Minority Issues and Freedom of Association in raising concern about the closure of places of worship and churches affiliated with the Protestant Church of Algeria, as well as acts of discrimination against members of the Protestant Christian minority in the country. Specifically, over a 2-year period in 2019, 9 churches affiliated with the PCA had been subjected to closure by regional governors, and a further 49 had been threatened with closure at the time of drafting the allegation letter. Concerns were also raised about the behavior of law enforcement officers during the closures, including the use of physical force against worshippers and church representatives. In its response, the government of Algeria defended the closure of the places of worship due to their failure to meet administrative formalities. I welcome the opportunity to join you today and hope that the panelists may be able to share their deliberations with me subsequently. I'd be most grateful of this, and I'm sorry once again to not be able to be with you. Thank you for your kind attention. I wish you all the best.
So we now are very pleased to give the floor to His Excellency Monsieur l'Ambassadeur Xavier Driencourt. Monsieur l'Ambassadeur, merci beaucoup de nous faire l'honneur de votre présence et de donc nous faire part de votre connaissance fine de l'Algérie, basée sur votre présence pendant plus de 7 années en tant qu'ambassadeur de France dans ce pays.
Merci. Merci à vous. Je vais effectivement donner un témoignage personnel, puisque j'ai été 2 fois ambassadeur de France en Algérie, donc au total presque 8 années. Témoignage personnel en tant qu'ancien ambassadeur de France, d'une part, et je disais en boutade aux Algériens que j'étais le défenseur de 2 minorités, les journalistes et les religieux. Et témoignage en tant également que chrétien, puisque j'ai beaucoup pratiqué les différentes communautés religieuses algériennes. Alors, je dirais que le cas de l'Algérie est un paradoxe. C'est la question de la liberté d'association et de la liberté religieuse est vraiment un paradoxe. D'une part, il y a un cadre juridique qui a été rappelé tout à l'heure, qui est un cadre juridique assez libéral, puisque la Constitution algérienne garantit officiellement la liberté de culte, mais celle-ci est applicable principalement au culte musulman, et les autres religions sont étroitement encadrées, soumises à un régime d'autorisation et d'agrément. Et c'est ça la clé de tout le dispositif algérien, c'est le régime d'autorisation et d'agrément. Sans autorisation, sans agrément, vous n'êtes rien et vous n'existez pas. Pas seulement les communautés religieuses, mais toutes les associations que, en tant qu'ambassadeur, j'ai eu à traiter, donc, pour lesquelles j'ai dû intervenir. Donc l'agrément, l'autorisation, c'est l'alpha et l'oméga. Paradoxe également parce que le ministre des cultes se montre très ouvert, très libéral. Je le voyais assez souvent. Il est l'interlocuteur officiel et le seul interlocuteur des églises d'Algérie. Il y a, vous le savez, en Algérie, le culte de Notre-Dame d'Afrique. Et il se trouve que pendant mon premier mandat en Algérie, j'ai assisté et j'ai piloté la restauration de la basilique Notre-Dame d'Afrique. Et cette inauguration, elle a eu lieu, ce qui est un paradoxe, en présence du secrétaire général du FLN qui représentait le gouvernement algérien. Et on a exécuté Kassaman, l'hymne national algérien, à l'orgue de la basilique. Paradoxe également, on invite régulièrement l'archevêque d'Alger, qui est Monseigneur Vesco aujourd'hui, après Monseigneur Desfarges, à toutes les cérémonies officielles pour montrer que l'Église d'Algérie fait partie de la vie politique du pays. Et l'archevêque d'Alger est invité également aux cérémonies du 1er novembre. Il était tout récemment invité à l'inauguration de la grande mosquée d'Alger. Il y a toujours la cathédrale d'Alger, la cathédrale d'Oran, la cathédrale d'Hippone. Il y a quelques paroisses dans Alger, mais ailleurs, le culte catholique est beaucoup plus compliqué à pratiquer. Et enfin, il y a un nonce apostolique à Alger avec des relations diplomatiques avec le Saint-Siège. Donc, en apparence, il y a un certain sentiment d'ouverture, de liberté, voire de tolérance. En tout cas, c'est inscrit comme cela dans la Constitution et dans les lois algériennes. Mais la réalité, vous l'avez dit les uns les autres, elle est tout autre, parce que derrière cette apparence que j'ai décrite, vous avez l'article 51 de la nouvelle Constitution algérienne de 2020, donc c'est tout récent, qui dispose que la liberté d'opinion est inviolable, la liberté de conscience des cultes est garantie, elle s'exerce dans le respect de la loi. Et donc, ces libertés ne vont pas jusqu'à inclure la liberté de conscience qui avait été constitutionnalisée avant, mais retirée en 2020, ce qui est un fort recul, puisque ça sape le droit de croire ou de ne pas croire ou de changer de religion. L'ancien ministre des cultes disait encore tout récemment qu'un Algérien ne peut évidemment qu'être musulman. Donc tout est dit dans cette phrase. En effet, le prosélytisme est interdit et une ordonnance de février 2006 vise essentiellement à restreindre les conversions vers le catholicisme ou le protestantisme, conversions qui sont de plus en plus nombreuses depuis le début des années 2000. Et puis, toutes les communautés religieuses que j'ai pu voir, que j'ai rencontrées durant mes deux séjours à Alger, en tant qu'ambassadeur ou en tant que chrétien, me racontaient tous et toutes les nombreuses difficultés quotidiennes, la bureaucratie administrative et tatillonne qui faisait leur vie quotidienne, autorisation nécessaire pour se déplacer. Les moines de Tibérine, par exemple, doivent avoir une autorisation pour aller à Médéa, qui est à 5 km, et doivent avoir une escorte pour aller à Médéa. Que ce soit les moines de Tibérine, les pères de Foucault qui sont à La Sécrème, sont également étroitement surveillés par la gendarmerie. Il me racontait que pour aller chez le médecin, il y avait le gendarme qui les suivait jusque dans le cabinet médical. et les curés des paroisses très isolées dans les villes algériennes, pour eux, c'est particulièrement dramatique et compliqué. Je rappelle aussi les ennuis faits à Monseigneur Bader, qui était le précédent archevêque d'Alger, et qui avait le tort, si je puis dire, d'être un Jordanien, donc il parlait parfaitement l'arabe, il connaissait l'islam et il pouvait répondre au ministre des cultes en lui disant « Mon vieux, moi je connais l'islam autant que toi, donc tu n'as rien à me raconter sur l'islam. » Enfin, pour mémoire aussi, les difficultés bureaucratiques faites pour organiser la cérémonie de canonisation des moines de Tibérine et de Monseigneur Claverie et des différents religieux qui avaient été tués pendant la guerre civile. Donc voilà, il y a beaucoup de difficultés bureaucratiques, et vous l'avez rappelé tout à l'heure en citant l'exemple de Caritas, qui a été fermé donc tout récemment, parce que, encore une fois, l'autorisation, l'agrément, c'est quelque chose qui est particulièrement important. De même que l'archevêque d'Alger me disait qu'on lui interdisait, parce qu'il n'avait pas l'autorisation requise, de recevoir des virements du Saint-Siège de Rome, donc parce que c'était considéré comme des financements de l'étranger. Et puis, je ne mentionne pas, vous l'avez fait tout à l'heure, les fermetures et les interdictions d'assemblées religieuses en Kabylie et la fermeture d'églises. Alors, quelles sont, et j'en viens à la conclusion, quelles sont les raisons de ce paradoxe? Encore une fois, un cadre juridique qui est officiellement libéral et une réalité quotidienne qui est toute autre. Première raison, c'est évidemment l'affirmation permanente et constante depuis 1962 donc de la suprématie de la religion musulmane. C'est une politique constante, mais qui est particulièrement affirmée aujourd'hui. Deuxième raison, c'est la crainte de conversion de musulmans vers le christianisme, et l'exemple qui serait ainsi donné. Troisième raison, sans le dire, c'est sans doute aussi une raison plus politique, ce sont les Kabyles qui sont particulièrement visés et qui se sont davantage tournés vers religion catholique ou protestante, et ce n'est pas un hasard si les fermetures d'églises interviennent en Kabylie, parce que c'est facile de faire l'amalgame au nom de l'ordre public, de la sécurité entre évangéliques, protestants, catholiques et kabyles. Et enfin, dernière raison peut-être, c'est aussi le rôle peut-être de l'Église catholique elle-même, qui est depuis 1962, qui est une Église algérienne, et qui est l'Église en fait qui est aux yeux des Algériens l'Église du colonisateur, l'Église de la France, et Monseigneur Duval, Monseigneur Tessier, Monseigneur Desfarges, Monseigneur Vesco ont tous pris la nationalité algérienne, et cette Église d'Algérie affirme haut et fort qu'elle ne veut pas procéder à des conversions, elle ne veut pas encourager les conversions d'Algériens vers le christianisme. Et on l'a vu donc avec la dissolution de Caritas, puisque Monseigneur Vesco a indiqué ne pas souhaiter entrer en conflit avec les autorités. Donc voilà, il y a aussi pas une responsabilité, mais un rôle marqué par l'Église d'Algérie pour des raisons de prudence quotidienne, parce qu'ils savent que s'ils vont au conflit, ils seront perdants. Voilà, c'est un témoignage personnel, évidemment. Je ne représente pas la France, mais je voulais répondre à votre invitation et vous donner ce témoignage. Merci.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur l'Ambassadeur. Nous allons maintenant passer la parole pour les propos conclusifs et les recommandations à Joseph Jensen, donc de Jubilee Campaign. La parole est à vous.
Thank you very much. In the conclusion, I would like to thank you, all the distinguished speakers, for raising the issue of massive human rights violation based on freedom of assembly, association, and religious or belief in Algeria. After hearing the distinguished speakers, experts, and survivors, it seemed that Algeria has consistently denied or ignored almost 23 communications and call for several UN mandates to abolish all legislative provisions that violates freedom of religion or belief or association. And these mandates urge Algeria to ensure that all persons, including atheists and those who have renounced the Muslim faith, are fully able to exercise their freedom of thought, conscience, and religion. It is the time for Algeria to uphold its commitment as a member of two critical UN bodies, the UN Human Rights Council and the member of security, as Algeria has become the member of two bodies of the UN Council of UN mechanism, has the more responsibility to uphold its commitment to deliver the rights to their citizens. Algeria needs to recognize its violation as first step, and its second step, work to repeal all amendment laws, all laws that violate of freedom of religion and assemblies. It's time for all stakeholders, as we have been involved, we have been doing dialogue, talking with several stakeholders, member of the states, mandates, to take serious stance and take action, urging Algeria to take necessary steps to end these atrocities and give all rights to its citizens to profess, for religious of freedom, to conscience, and to assembly, to practice their beliefs in its country. And also, as they have already encouraged, and today we also urge the member of states and all stakeholders, UN bodies, must encourage Algeria to uphold and listen to these recommendations that has been sent by the survivors and by the speakers, saying that dropping all charges against the Youssef who has been convicted for 1 year to prisons, drop all charges against him and give him right to freely to practice his belief, and also to other non-Muslims who are having religion or not having religion to practice their religion. Recognizing Evangelical Protestant Church and the rights of its members to meet and prayer in the church, outside the church, in its community, to profess their beliefs with one another. Also revising its legal provisions used to limit the freedom of assembly and association of Christians and other non-Muslim, specifically Article 160 and 144 bis 2, and in Penal Code, Article 11, 1 and 2 of Ordinance 603. We also call of Algerian government to allow Caritas, which simply, help poor, simply promote justice, bring help poor and bring justice and harmony in the society, being as a Catholic organization and mission in Algeria, allow them to work freely, as Algeria has shut down their offices or their work in Algeria. So we urge Algerian government, for God's sake, have mercy and let these people free work to help poor. And we call Algerian government to allow all reopen all churches that they have shut down. It is really high time, and it is time for Algeria to take action and give complete freedom of religion and association for its citizens to open the church and to gather in their community to exercise their freedom, their beliefs. I hope the voice has been heard, and I hope Algeria will take necessary action. I hope the stakeholders will do everything in their power to call Algerian government to take necessary action. Thank you very much.
So thank you very much. Time is now finished for this side event. I would like again to thank you very much for being here, coming, and sharing with you the situation of Algerians, Christians especially, and more broadly freedom of association and freedom of religion. We will publish a summary of what has been said today on our websites. You can see the European Center for Law and Justice website and Jubilee campaign. If you want all the references to cases, to norms, laws, and the different aspects we've been raising today. We will also do the follow-up with the special procedures and the UPR on Algeria. So we would be very pleased to share with the delegations that are interested on this matter all information and to see how we can proceed together to keep this issue on the agenda. Thank you very much.